everyone. You must have heard of several incidences of a school staff being arrested under Pocso Act. What is this Pocso Act? And why is it that you as an educational institution should be aware of it? To help you understand this, today we have with us Ruth Alice Thomas. She will help us understand what is Pocso Act. Thank you so much, Ruth, for being with us today. Ruth, can you briefly talk about what is Pocso Act?
Thank you, Vasanta. So, Pocso Act was brought about in 2013. Pocso Act mainly aims to protect children from all kinds of sexual offences. So, basically, Pocso means protection of children from sexual offences. So, Pocso Act has many features. Some of the features are that it defines all kinds of sexual assault, ranging from penetrative sexual assault, then sexual assault, sexual harassment, and also it talks about offences wherein the other person makes the child touch parts or makes the child see pornographic videos. All of it would come under the offences of Pocso. So it's very vivid, very clear. Apart from it, there is mandatory reporting and also all the information that gets registered under the Pocso Act, which means if an offence is registered under the Pocso Act, it is important that all the information needs to be maintained confidential. Confidentiality is maintained throughout. And then there are also other features wherein there is child-friendly investigation so that the child does not feel traumatized, the child feels more at ease in speaking up what happened to the child. And also there's a special court wherein there's special child-friendly trial that is recorded under the court system. And also there is complete confidentiality maintained even in the courts. So it is to ensure that the child is encouraged to speak what happened to the child, and at the same time the child does not feel traumatized with the normal court system, but the child feels more encouraged to speak about the offence that happened to that child.
Okay. Ruth, does Pocso Act only try an adult who has committed any offence?
No, it can also try other, children as well. It will depend on facts and circumstance of each case. But most of the time, it is against adults, and most of the cases that gets registered as against adults.
Okay. And what happens if the offender is also a child and so is a victim?
So there is a separate system apart from the normal system. And now if that offender is a child, we have a separate act called as the Juvenile Justice Act, wherein that offender who is a child is again tried there by a juvenile justice board. There's a separate system so that the child is not treated as an adult but more as a child who needs correctional systems. But again, it will depend on the offence that the child has committed. Now if the child has committed something like a rape, like there are cases where there is a gang rape and a teen is involved, and in such cases there's always this confusion. With the new amendment, if a teen is involved or if a child who is above 16 years of age is involved in commission of an offence that includes gang rape or rape, in such cases the court takes a separate stand where the Juvenile Justice Board needs to give a report, and then it will be treated more like an adult court. The offence will move back to an adult court, and there this teen will be treated. So that's why I'm saying it will depend on facts and circumstance of each of the case.
Okay. And Ruth, in your experience, have you handled lot of cases under Pocso Act?
Yes, I've had many cases wherein there's always a combination of different offences involved. In some cases, what we see is the child was abused right from a very young age till the child reaches 16 or 17, and then the child realizes that things have gone beyond control, and also that's when the child gets the courage to speak the truth, and mostly because the community and the family may help the child more. And I've had cases like that. There are also cases where there are a lot of runaway children or children who are in the bracket what we call as children in need of care and protection. Those children, obviously they need more protection and they are, usually neglected. many of these kids are, abused, and so many of those cases also have had experience with. And also there are cases where children are sold off and, used for online exploitation. It could be sexual exploitation, it could be commercial sexual exploitation and things like that. I've had cases as well in that. But in all these things, what we see, a common thread is that all these cases will come under the special court, which is a good thing for the practitioners as well as for stakeholders, because the child will feel at ease. The child's matter is brought to the court where the child also feels like there is someone to hear the child, more than treating the child as an adult and victimizing the child and things like that. So it's slightly better, at least the vision under the act is to ensure that the child feels less traumatized, the child is rehabilitated and things like that.
Yeah. Ruth, you mentioned that it will be tried under special court.
Yes.
Can you explain what does this special court mean?
So in every district there is a special court that is just for that tries just child offences, which basically means if an FIR is registered and Pocso sections are there, then those cases will come under the special court. Now the significant features of this is it is maintained or it is heard by a special judge who is trained specifically to listen to Pocso cases. So he or she would understand or treat the case very differently, not like adult matters. Another thing is children are given more freedom. They need not see the accused. In most cases there is a barrier kept, or a curtain kept, so that the child when testifying need not see the accused. Questions are not put forward by the lawyers or the prosecutor. So there's always a chief examination and a cross examination. Chief examination is when the child tells the story. Cross examination is when the defense lawyer or the accused lawyer asks questions. But in this case what happens is those questions are not directly put forward by the prosecutor or the defense lawyer. It's mostly by the judge. So the judge will ask these questions. They have these lawyers or prosecutors need to give those questions to the judge. The judge would ask in a very friendly manner. Again, breaks are provided for the child. So if the child feels like if the child needs the day off and need not want to complete his or her testimony, then the child can take those breaks. Sufficient breaks are provided. Apart from that, the child themselves can have a lawyer, like a victim's lawyer. Usually I take up matters where I'm the victim's lawyer. I stand up for the child. If there's any change from the normal in system, then we'll put in petition saying that the child needs more protection and things like that. And then also it's important to understand that the child can also have counselors. So if the child feels like, the child is really scared, or if the child is having some kind of special needs, then the court needs to provide that as well. So it's seen very differently from a normal court. Herein there is more proactivity expected from that special judge as well. So that's why, it's a welcome step to see that there's a special court.
Mm-hmm. What I hear is that it's to protect the child from further being traumatized.
Yes, because coming to court itself, I feel like most of these children feel very traumatized. Even for an adult, what I see is it's not easy for them to openly talk about it. And so it's very hard when it is a sexual offense. And most of the time what happens is this must have happened 2 years back or 1 year back, and to relive the entire trauma is kind of hard for their child as well. So the court's vision is to ensure that the child does not feel more traumatized. I mean, it's still hard for them, but at least to provide as much support from the system. Even in cases like, where children are involved, the judges also try to finish the chief and the cross on the same day, and does not allow adjournments and things like that. Otherwise what we see is today they'll come and then the defense lawyer will ask for an adjournment that will go on for the next hearing. But in Pocso matters, judges are more sensitive. They don't try to they try to close the case as fast as possible.
Okay, Ruth, now that you've explained what is Pocso Act, can you please talk about why should schools be aware about this act?
Yeah, so there's an alarming rate of offences happening over children. We all know that, like every 30 minutes, if you see the statistics, there's one child being abused, every 30 minutes in India, which means the statistics of child abuse is very high in India. And it also means that there are a lot of cases that are not being reported as well. Right, and so most of the time we know that children spend a considerable amount of time in schools. So what happens is, like, because they are in schools for a considerable amount of time, what we also notice is that there's a lot of other offenses also that is falling over children. Not in every school, but we have seen there's a considerable rise of POCSO matters coming from schools as well. It could be management, it could be faculty, it could be students experiencing from other students, or college students, things like that. So it's important for every one of them, like it's not just for one community alone, but for every one of them to understand POCSO. So it's important that students understand, faculty understand, other administrative staff also understand about the importance of POCSO Act, because at the end of the day, it's very important to know what to do next. That's what is very, very important. Now, I'll give you an example. My personal experience is that when I was in school, I mean, we've heard about cases wherein my juniors also had to face sexual abuse, and we were all kids. We did not know what to do at that point of time. We did not even know that we had to tell our parents. It was just hushed up and gone. Right now, we know that there's a POCSO Act, but again, not many know what to do next. So it's important to give that awareness, because this act is brought about so that children feel empowered, and if there's any such offense, the child feels like they need to run and tell their parents, and ensure that school provides a protective environment, and also that it's addressed well. That is why we have the act. And so awareness is a very important aspect, and I feel that every school should ensure that this awareness is made out, not just to students, but to parents, to administrative staff and faculty.
Okay. So Ruth, what is the role of school management in protecting children?
Yeah, school management actually has a very central role in ensuring that the entire community that they are in charge of should be aware about POCSO Act. That includes, like I've already stated, parents and children, as well as, administrative staff, the faculty there. Everybody should know what is the applicable offenses that's under the Act, what happens once an offense is registered, how can, certain offenses be tried, and all of this needs to be, properly trained and properly most of these faculty members should understand how to go about such offenses. And so what I would feel is that one is that create awareness sessions separately, not just for the entire community together, but because students understand things very differently, especially younger children understand things very differently, the older children understand things very differently. Have awareness sessions for them. At the same time, have awareness sessions even for the entire faculty, which includes administrative staff. Another important thing that management needs to ensure that there is a designated child expert within each of the schools, so that if there is any such event or an incident that has happened, they do understand what is the next step, how to communicate to the child. All of this is important. And also to ensure that how this offense needs to be registered. Many of the times, schools are just unaware and they try to put it on the parents. Instead, support the parents also in ensuring that an FIR is filed, have child experts talk to the child, so the child doesn't feel like the child is accused, but feels more like it's not a mistake, it's happened, and it's not my mistake, it's that person who has committed the crime, and the child is more encouraged and less traumatized.
So Ruth, what I understand is when a child reports about any incidents of offense, does the incident should be something that happened in the school vicinity? How about if the offense has taken place at home? How should a school management respond?
Yes, so this is a very tricky question, right? And most of the time, I would also like to bring statistics that 90% of the POCSO cases happens at home. Yeah, which means there is high amount of sexual abuse happening to children within their own homes. It could be, close family members like, their parents, or it could be one of their parents or their uncles or grandparents. We are not sure. So all of that is still happening. So I feel schools should be aware of it and ensure that, the child is supported throughout. And there is a mandatory clause under the Act which says that you should mandatorily report it to the concerned authorities. So it is also a mandatory duty from the school side, if they get to know about such offences, to immediately report such cases.
Okay, so if the incident has happened in the school or outside the
Yes.
school, then there is a mandate for the school to report it.
Yes,
So
yes.
when you say a mandate to report, whom are we reporting to? Whom should we report to?
So basically, mandatory reporting, there are different avenues available. I mean, the easiest way we can do it is to call the police jurisdiction police officer and ensure that an FIR is registered. I mean, that becomes a faster route, but there are lots of other avenues possible, like you can contact a child expert NGO who does such kind of cases, and they themselves can go and report cases. We can use other avenues like the Child Rights Commission. Every state has a Child Rights Commission. Use those Child Rights Commission. Then we have a toll-free number which is like freely available. Anybody can call, which is 1098. Just call up this toll-free number and then report the crime. So there are the different avenues available. Just see how much the school is also equipped. In some cases, schools very equipped. They have an authority to look into it, so they can themselves go to the police station and file the FIR. If not, utilize any of these avenues and get this offense reported.
Okay, okay. So Ruth, what would be the steps that should be followed now, say if the incident has happened in the school? So how should the management respond?
Yeah. So in most cases, what we see is to ensure that there is a child expert. Otherwise it's very hard because the child would give brief details. Don't have just many people asking the same questions to the child. What happens is then there are times when the child doesn't want to talk about it anymore. So get those brief details, have a child expert do it, and then immediately report it to the police station. The police officers are usually trained on this aspects and they do a separate investigation by themselves. Now under the Pocso Act, it clearly states that even when the police officer is doing an interview, they cannot come in uniform. They have to come in their normal civil dress, have the families involved. So ensure that the child is with someone that the child feel comfortable with, when these questions are put forward. Not to repeat questions, give them equal breaks, not to keep asking them the same questions over and over again. So there are a lot of do's and don'ts under the Pocso Act. So I would say there is no specific clauses mentioned for schools, but take it as a guidance wherein have one child expert talk to the child, get brief details but get those important details, and then immediately get it registered, and then there is a system in place where the police officer would do the rest of the work.
Okay. So Ruth, one challenge I see that a school can be defamed. So how do we handle that?
So that is how we bring in this information. Even if we hide such information, that is more defaming, right? So it's important for schools to understand that it is not their mistake, right? It's an offense that's happened to one of their children, and how best shall I protect the child? So ensure that there is counselors provided to the child. The whole support system feels comfortable. At the same time, the child also feels comfortable to take care of it, and the rest gets taken care of. What we usually see is, most of the time in my experience, the schools try to hide it, and then it turns out very differently, and then there is defamation and things like that because they don't want others to know, or because their faculty is involved and things like that. But the most important thing is to always have no tolerance for such offenses, like not to give any kind of leeway in such cases, because at the end of the day, child sexual abuse is a very grievous offense. It can traumatize the child for the rest of that child's life. So we need to understand it from that perspective. So I would say every school, when they get to know of this information, have the legal steps be put forward, ensure that the case is registered, and ensure that the child is supported. And then things will fall in place, I feel. Otherwise, I usually see is the other way around, wherein they try to hide, then it comes out, then it becomes an issue and all that. And definitely, when their own faculty is involved, I understand there's also this tussle between, both part of the same community. But in these cases, I would say, because there's a child involved, to follow the legal steps, then I don't think there'll be too much of, issues with regard to legal compliance. Like even the reporting the crime doesn't make that person, convicted. Reporting the crime only gives you the right to tell an information to the actual authority. So the authority will then take the time to investigate and come to a conclusion. But your job as an institution, as an educational institution, is to report such crimes.
Okay, okay. So, how do I ensure that my child is protected in my school premises?
Yes. Some of the things that we always talk about is awareness. Awareness is central. Have, awareness every year, and, have experts talk about it. And, especially children, they are growing up, we are in this new uh, world where there's a huge advent and paradigm shift of technology, and so the way we see and the way children see are very different. So it's important that we give awareness sessions accordingly, ensure that there's also prevention methods talked, like there's more of education brought out to the child. So basically, children should understand how to protect themselves when there's sexual advances or when there's a threat. What do I do? Most of the time we've all heard about this, like small children are taught what is a good touch and what's a bad touch. Now if there's a bad touch, what do? Children should be able to talk about it. Children should be able to go back to their parents and say that this has happened, and things like that. And so usually the whole quote is go, run and tell your parents. So that's how it is, right? So it's very important, and that's how we start. But as children grow up, especially when they are teens, the whole concept of sex education is very important. So they should also know about their sexuality. So it's important to talk about it, have them discuss about it. And also it's important that these children also understand the concept of consent, and that even they shouldn't get involved in sexually harassing one another. So all of these are very important. But apart from that, I would say that CCTV cameras, physical environment is also a good way of figuring out protection. Like there's posters of awareness that is played out in those soft boards, CCTV cameras, proper lightings. These are some of the other things that can be helped. And then apart from that, obviously these online media has taken another toll altogether. We know there's a lot of online offenses. So I would say parents and teachers both are involved. They are able to give a screen time for children. They are able to supervise. Many of the times what we see is parents are not as technologically advanced as their children, and so children know how to go around it. So be technologically adapted to the current system and things like that. And then that's when you will also see if if children are in the same sites and sites that they are supposed to be in and things like that. So these are some of the tips, but the most important thing that I would say is continuously provide awareness to all groups. That's when we will see a reduction in the crime as such. And it's also a mandate under the Pocso Act that every school should have awareness sessions provided to all. That includes children and other adult members.
Okay, thank you. And Ruth, now specifically talking about the rules, how should a nurse, we have in-house nurse, how should they respond when an incident of offense has taken place?
Okay, so most of the time I feel like if such an offense has taken place through, it must have come through the nurse or it must have come through counselors. Usually what we do is if first aid needs to be given, if medical examination needs to be given, just provide that immediate medical whatever help. But at the same time, I would say as fast as possible, give information to the police. Let the police register the crime first, because then it becomes the responsibility of the police, because there's a lot of procedures that needs to be followed under Pocso Act, like medical examination needs to be done, forensic test needs to be done, and usually nobody is equipped to do all that, and the only authority that is equipped to do that is the police. So ensure that the police is given information, and then the police should ensure that these kids are taken for medical examination, they are provided forensic examination. And at the same time when all of this is going on, the child might be feeling they must be feeling very uneasy. So ensure that their parents are with them. This is what the law also says. Ensure that the child is with someone that the child feels comfortable. Even when the child is going for the medical examination, ensure that 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 all those information is given to the child, that you are being taken, and provide it in such a way that the child does not feel very scared. It's after all just an examination where the doctors are seeing what next, how can they help, what is a report needs to be brought about to see how, what was the offense and things like that. So to break it down in a way that the child understands, and then once the child is fine with it, then do such examinations. And if the child does not have parents, or if the parents are involved in such offense, then it's important to have the superintendent, or female senior employee of that hospital to be with the child when this examination is going on. But usually don't do it private. This is what I keep telling everybody. This cannot be done privately. This has to be done in a government registered hospital. There are few hospitals that is designated for such examinations. So that's why I keep stressing the fact that get the FIR done, then it's the responsibility of the police to do the next steps, especially medical examination or forensic examination and things like that.
Right. So what I understand is the role of a nurse is just to do the first aid.
Yeah.
And then the school management is required to complain and FIR immediately. Are they even obligated to inform the parents?
Yes, they are they are supposed to be informing parents. Again, take it in a based on facts and circumstance. I would keep saying this because each circumstance would be different. Now if it's related to an offense wherein one of the parents are involved, okay, in such cases don't be very strategic and ensure talk to the child and see whether the other parent will be ready to support the child. If not, then talk to the CWC or child welfare committee, or you can talk to the police officer and then get it registered, and then they can take the the whole legal steps forward. What I'm saying is, see it based on case to case. In some cases, if the offense has happened within the school, it's totally understandable, and it's a responsibility of the school to immediately call the parents and get the child that support. But if it's happened in such a way, it's happened in their own homes, then be strategic about it. Talk to the person who is who is going to support the child, get that information from the child, and then have other officials involved, like the police officer or or even a CWC member. Like every district will have CWC members. Call the CWC members, and then they can then do the next steps. So be strategic when it's within homes.
So Ruth, what do you do when I as a parent don't want to lodge a complaint? How do you respond?
So there is this mandatory calling from the act itself. If you don't do it, the school as well as the parent will get a penalty, or they can get a punishment to go to jail, which is imprisonment. So tell them that they don't have a choice. You need to mandatorily report, because it is something to do as an act, as a mandatory act. And so it's important to give that information. That's why I would say awareness is very important. So bring that awareness to the parents as well. So most of them are aware that when there is such an offense, it's important, and it is a mandatory duty from the school to immediately record such information and give it to the police. Again, it will depend. I mean, do a brief inquiry, that I would say, and then decide whether to register. But most of the time I would say register the offense, because most of the sexual offenses would have been continuously going on for a period of time, and the child must have opened up only after it has reached a peak. So it's important for the both the family as well as the school to understand that they don't have a choice here. They need to mandatorily report it.
Right. So Ruth, what I understand is awareness is important both at the school management level. The staff needs to be made aware, even the children need to be made aware, and now I also learn from you that even the parents need to be aware of it. Sure. So it's okay for the school to call the parents for an awareness and talk to them about Pocso, yes. How the school is going to respond in case of an incident, whether it's within the school or whether the child is reporting something that might be happening even in their neighborhood. True. Right? True. Okay. Ruth, you mentioned that most of the times these children report any incidents either to the counselor or it could be to their class teacher. So, how should they respond?
Yeah. Yeah, even in my experience, what we have seen is most of the children, usually, while they are talking to the, closest faculty, that could be the class teacher, or when they are talking to the counselor, because counselors are much more, experienced in, getting information from the child. And so they are able to speak freely and they are able to give information. So the first thing, that a counselor or a class teacher needs to do is to immediately, report this offense. Now, apart from this, we need to understand that this child needs a lot of support. An entire community needs to support the child. The child should not be blamed at any instance because it's not the fault of the child. That needs to be very clearly laid out. And also the child needs to be, empowered to tell. Most of the time they are so ashamed, they feel so shameful, they feel like they have committed the crime. So the first thing that both the individuals need to do as responsible caregivers is that ensure that the child feels empowered to tell that to the next person and tell that this is just because of the fact that you are being protected, and the person who has committed the crime needs to actually fall and needs to face the justice system. So ensure that that kind of support is provided. What we see in many of the cases is when there's no counselors, many of the children do not want to talk about it further. And this is a huge, huge journey. It doesn't end in just an investigation. We all know how systems are. You have an FIR, then the child needs to speak to the police, then there's a medical examination, then then this child is brought to court. In the court also the child needs to tell whatever happened. So it's not easy for the child, and it's very hard, because that's not what the child intended to see. So ensure that there is support throughout, and that's where we see that counselors bring in a miracle effect. Like in many of my cases also, when children were rescued from commercial sexual exploitation, initially they were so scared and they were so fearful and they didn't want to say. They even would tell that there's no offense that is on me, it's just people are making it up. But through counselors way of talking to the child and providing therapy from that trauma, the child is able to speak the truth, not just to us, not just to the police officer, but even after 1 year or even after 2 years, when they come to court, they are able to talk about what has happened to them. And that is why even the Pocso Act very recently has brought in certain amendments wherein they've asked the cases to have also a specific caregiver, like a support person and even a counselor. So if there's counseling required, which is mandatorily required in many of the cases, we have seen that, right? Children, it's not easy for adults and it's much more complicated for children. And so it's important to understand that counselors are there throughout. So even if you are a counselor in school, ensure that if there's a child who has reported this system, reported the offense, the counselor should understand that it's not an easy battle for the child. She's facing also a legal system. He or she is facing a legal system. So ensure that there is therapy provided from the school as well, and provide that power to the child, and then obviously the child will get healed from the pain. It's still very hard, when we talk, how hard it is. So it is not easy, but at least we can ease out the pain that they went through.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ruth. Ruth, I'm sure that our viewers have a lot more questions. So is there a place where they can contact, get more information, ask questions?
Yes, so there are a lot of links available in websites, and in just if you Google it, you will be able to understand. But apart from that, just contact lawyers, or we all practice specifically on Pocso. We give special priority to Pocso cases. So you can contact me. My firm is SRT Law Associates. You can also contact me via phone or via email IDs, or connect with other NGOs who work on the same subject. And I'm sure there'll be many to help. There's always a community. It's just that you need to have the will. And once you have the will, there's obviously a community who's there to help out in such cases.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Ruth, do you have any concluding statements?
So I just want to say that it's very important to ensure that there's awareness throughout. when we were youngsters, we were not this aware, and there are times we still regret, why didn't we, stop some of the abuses, or why didn't we approach the right authorities. Now we have more awareness sessions coming up, and so it's very important to understand that there's more awareness sessions given to colleges and institutions and educational institutions. Apart from that, children must be empowered. All our children must be empowered. We have our own kids, or we have families who have kids. Ensure that you empower those kids to say no, because that's something that it's not easy for a child who is facing abuse to say no, because if they had known, then they wouldn't have a continuous set of abuse falling on them. So it's very important to ensure that the child is able to say no and fight against such abuse.
Ruth, thank you so much. This interview was so helpful. I'm sure most of the schools, me working in schools, I have noticed that not everyone is aware of Pocso Act. And this one is going to be very, very helpful. And I hope all the schools have learned what is Pocso Act and what are the steps you can take when there is an offense that happens in school, or when a child reports any sexual offense. We plan to host many more webinars. Hopefully we will invite Ruth, and you can ask questions that will help you. Thank you so much for watching this.